Well, our name is Riggs. We make beer, and we want to have a company.
Welcome to Business Casual. I'm Steve Holstein, and in this episode, we're talking to the guys behind Riggs Beer Company in Urbana, Illinois. Riggs, that's a cool name, except that it wasn't their first choice.
Darren was in California working for Anheuser-Busch. I was in Germany in brewing school and working in a brewery out there. We thought this name was awesome, but when we came back home and bounced it off some people, it went over like a lead balloon, to be quite honest. So we're like, well, let's go back to the drawing board. My name is Matt Riggs. I'm co-owner with my brother and our wives of Riggs Beer Company, and I'm in charge of beer production and sales.
I'm Darren Riggs. I'm co-owner along with my wife of Riggs Beer Company, and I'm in charge of assisting Matt with the brewing process, but then I'm also on the engineering and facilities side and quality assurance on the beer.
We grew up on a small Champaign County farm. Southeast corner of the county. It's a 300-acre farm, so it's not huge, and there's 3 kids. So if you take that and divide it by 3, you're at 100 acres, and boy, 100 acres, you can't really support much of anything in a good year, let alone in a bad year on 100 acres of ground. So Darren and I and our sister Megan, we all kind of knew from a young age that we'd have to figure some other way to supplement the farm income, or make a primary income somewhere else, and the farm could be something on the side. So Darren and I both went to college here at the U of I. We were on ROTC scholarships. He went on to be an officer in the Navy. I was an officer in the Marines. And that whole time we're thinking, well, we got our education, great. We got a steady job, great. But how do we get back to the farm? It became apparent at that point that we could possibly use our farm to help us make beer.
For the good of man.
Exactly.
Behind, right?
Yeah, this is a very theological thing for us, because grain makes beer,
right,
and our farm makes grain. So, 2 degrees of separation, and we figured, well, first of all, why is nobody doing this? The answer to that's because it's really hard. It's a technical process, especially when you want to use your own grain that's maybe not quite perfect for brewing, and you got to convince it to be made into beer. And second of all, back then the market wasn't really ready for a local beer. But this whole craft beer revolution thing that's happened. There's over 5,000 breweries now in America. When we were on the farm, there were a couple, maybe 500 back.
But it sounds like what differentiates you guys at Riggs is that you're growing your own crops. How many brewers do that? I mean, how many craft brewers do that? I mean, obviously
that's really uncommon in the industry.
I wish I knew that answer, but yeah.
There's a few out there. Some of the bigger names that people would recognize are Sierra Nevada out in California has a small amount of production acreage that they make kind of one beer. They call it their state beer. Rogue up in Oregon does the same thing.
I've been reading some brewing publications that this is starting to take off. We're doing it at the same time that a lot of other people that were waiting to do it started to do it, which has some advantages, because what that shows us is there's now a market for it. Mm-hmm. To have done this 10 years ago, I think Champaign County beer drinkers would not quite have been as receptive as they are today. They've opened up their palate to some different flavors that local beer can provide them, and now we're just kind of adding the next layer on top of that. That's a pretty cool layer, which is, we've used I think about 5,700 pounds of grain since of our own grain since starting brewing in May.
So I go out to eat, and I see the name Riggs just on a sign somewhere or at a bar somewhere. What do I need to ask for? What am I most likely to see?
You're most likely to see our top 2 selling beers that we make year-round. Our American Lager is kind of our Busch beer, but made by us, and it's not an aggressive beer. It's not a super hoppy beer. It's just kind of what you think of as a traditional lager beer. That's got 20% raw corn from our farm as an ingredient, 80% North Dakota malting barley. That's been a solid seller from day one, and it's fun for us because that really showcases the corn that we grow. And then the other beer that you're most likely to find out in town would be our Hefeweizen, which is a German-style wheat beer, and that beer contains 10% barley, malted barley, that we grew actually adjacent to the beer garden. So if you come out the beer garden, bring your kid, bring your dog, whatever you want to do, and look over. Right now we've got 3 acres of wheat and 3 acres of barley out there. Last summer's crop of barley is what we're putting in the Hefeweizen that you're drinking out at the restaurant.
So, Darren, describe your brother's sort of management or co-management style for me.
Oh, this should be good.
We can go back and edit this, right? Let's see. Well, Matt's very direct. He's always coming up with new ideas to bounce off of me, and sometimes I have to pull the reins back a little bit and say, well, maybe we need to think about that a little bit before we move forward with it. But I'll say more than half the time the ideas are pretty good ones, and it's like, well, wish I would have thought of that, and then we're moving off in a new direction and pushing, always pushing, always striving to figure out something new to do or a new way to market or sell more of our beer to keep the company going. You got to run out of money pretty quickly if we weren't selling the beer, so that's what he keeps pushing for.
Matt, how about you? Describe your brother Darren as a co-manager or his management style.
We have very different styles. Darren is a lot more methodical in his problem solving. I'm probably a lot more instinctual. And the good thing that allows this partnership to work is that our decision-making processes are both rooted in logic and reason. So even though we have different ways of going about it, at the end of the day, when it's decision time, I'd like to think that it's very easy for us to come to an agreement, because although we've taken different paths to get there, our mechanism to make the decision is actually almost identical. So Darren's a lot stronger in some of the technical systems when it comes to like power in the brewery, steam, that kind of stuff. He's got a lot more experience. He used to be the engineer on a submarine, so he kind of knows those systems.
So you could be the first nuclear brewer in the country if you wanted to, right?
I tell everyone who asks us that's a bad idea. There's enough licenses required to brew beer. I wouldn't even want to get started on the ones to have nuclear power.
There's 5,000 breweries in the country, large and small, and somebody out there is probably making some in their bathroom or whatever, their basement. But if they want to take it to the next level, what would you say to them?
I'd say write a business plan no shorter than 100 pages long, and have a lot of money you can bring to the table. Have a life savings, and if you've done that and you understand the technology required and the theory required behind making beer, good luck. Find financing and go for it, because it is awesome. It's a great way to make a living, but I would caution people that haven't saved up money for 10 years and people who haven't written a 100-page business plan that the easy days of just starting a brewery because there was a void in the market, that's over. It didn't used to be that way, and your beer on day one didn't have to be very good. Just because you were local, that would carry you. But that's not the case anymore. You have to be local and good and well-financed to survive, I think, anymore.
And if you have a brother who knows a thing or two about submarines, that helps too.
Yeah, not mandatory, but it definitely helped us out, sure.
Okay, I'm going to pitch you guys head-to-head in a little game I call Everything's Better with Beer.
I agree.
Okay.
I win.
So the answer has the word beer in it, okay? Here's the example. The donut-shaped cereal in a yellow box is Beerios, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Oh, wow.
So the little things used to power flashlights.
Bearderies.
Yeah, that was good.
Bearderies.
Good, Matt. What women wear on their ears for decoration.
Beer rings.
Yeah. He tells that only we can prevent forest fires.
Smokey the beer.
Another one for Matt. Something old people wear to hear better.
Beering aids.
You guys you're a good match. You're a good partnership. You each have two. All right, here's the tiebreaker here. A fruit you dip in chocolate or slice onto cereal.
Beer nanas.
Riggs Beer Company. That's simple. Seems to work. Was that easy to decide?
Well, we initially had a different name. when, like, on our 100-page business plan, right? Darren was in California working for Anheuser-Busch out there. I was in Germany in brewing school and working in a brewery out there. We thought this name was awesome. But when we came back home here to Champaign County and bounced it off some people, they were a little bit confused by it. And it went over like a lead balloon, to be quite honest. So we're like, well, let's go back to the drawing board.
Okay, so Darren, what was the original name that you thought was fantastic?
All right, but this was lots of deliberation went into this, but we were thinking Dual Citizen Brewing Company because I had gone through beer school here in the U.S. at University of California, Davis, and then I worked for a U.S. brewery. Matt did the opposite. He worked at a German brewery and then went and got his brewing education there in Munich. And so it was like we were going to have a dual citizen. And a lot of our beers actually still kind of reflect that in the fact that it's kind of a merger of German and American styles that we like to make. So we thought it was a good name, but everybody else kind of looked at us funny and scratched their heads.
Most people, when we would say, okay, so yeah, the name's Dual Citizen Brewing Company, they're like, well, who's the dual citizen? Are you a dual? I'm like, no, I'm American. It wasn't like, oh, cool name. I bet that tastes good already.
Yeah.
It was more like, well, explain that a little bit more. And I was like, I don't think I want to explain this every time for the rest of my life. So let's get real simple and basic with it. How do we make this essentially as Midwestern, family-oriented as possible? Kind of just Midwestern roots, back to the roots type of concept. It was like, well, our name is Riggs. We make beer, and we want to have a company. You know, the story about the farm, that's our marketing. And you don't have to get fancy when you've got a cool story like that that's pretty authentic. So we just went the simple route with it, and I'm really, really glad we did. It's been well received here.
What's your non-Riggs beer first choice beer? What do you like to drink? Just name one.
Okay, if I'm in Germany, it's a Spaten Helles, but it doesn't taste nearly as good here. I don't know what they do on the ship bringing it over from the Spaten Brewery in Munich.
Yeah.
And then if I'm here in the States, one of my favorite go-to beers is just a Busch Classic. I love that beer. It's a corn-based lager, just like our American lager. Very drinkable, delightful beer.
Yeah, for the lawnmower beer, I definitely have to go with the Busch Classic as well. If we're doing something a little bit fancier, then I have trouble finding a bad beer that Sierra Nevada makes. So almost anything that they make tastes pretty good.
Well, Matt and Darren, Riggs Beer Company, thanks for coming in. And as we finish up the beers here, what do you want to tell everybody?
I would like to just reiterate where we're at. It's a really special spot. It's the old TK Windles out on High Cross Road, east edge of Urbana on Route 130. Production area, there's a big glass wall when you walk in so you can really look in and see where your beer's made. Nice, clean environment, family-friendly environment, and we've got a giant beer garden. I lived in Germany for 3 years, and that's something I really came to love. I think we've got one of the cooler beer gardens that I've ever seen in America. It's big, surrounded by fields where we're growing grain that we're using in the beer. So if that intrigues anybody who's listening, please come out and check it out. It's pretty unique, and I'm a big fan of it, but I'm biased, so